like, admittedly, like I didn't really understand endurance sports.
Yeah.
But I think that might be because I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. So my type two fun is literally just being their dad,
Yeah,
you
totally.
know? But then, getting to meet Cody and Paul and his story of his grandfather and like just the legacy of Western States as a horse race and like just
Yeah.
to me, you know, outdoor sports have never been about like performance. That means something a little, not that it's not deep, but it means something deeper than
Yeah.
accomplishment to me. And then it was nice to see that even though, dude, endurance athletes are the real superheroes of like our society. I mean, I've never been more impressed to be, I feel like we're a different species.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it was just so cool to like learn from him and yeah, it's
Yeah.
just it's
Cool.
cool.
All right, well, let's just launch into it because obviously
Sure.
like this will be more like B2B focused. So I want to like learn I've read all the backstory on Mountain Gazette because I was just like so obsessed with the business after I learned about it and received my first issue. So I know about like the old ownership, but I want to like, obviously have you tell that story, talk a little
Yeah,
about your own background, and then like just kind of like talk about a lot of the practical business side of things, like, the
sure.
form and format, the size of the magazine, the size of the operation, the content, like curation process, things like
Yeah,
that. So I aim
sure.
for like 45 minutes, but like no more than an hour. Does that work for you? All
Totally, man.
right,
This is
sweet.
what I have going on today, and I'm an open book.
And then,
So
it's vacation time. I'm going to take my hoodie off real quick. One sec.
cool, no problem.
Mike Rogge, welcome to the podcast. Nice to see you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you for having me, Dylan.
Yeah, we were just talking about our overlapping connections, and I've just become a massive fan and admirer of what you're building with Mountain Gazette. I'm excited to talk all about it. First, I have sort of like an opening question that I'm asking people just to break the ice and get to know you on a little bit more of a personal level. This being more of a business and career focused show, I'd love to know what you wanted to be when you grew up, when you were a kid.
So that's funny. When I was a kid, you know, I'm almost 38. So back in like the late 80s, early 90s, the best part about being sick from school was you got to stay home and watch TV all day. And my parents were the only, I'm really dating myself, were the only ones in our family that had a cable box in their room. So I would like crash in mom and dad's room with some soup, sleep, and then I would turn on this premium service called HBO. And on HBO was this movie called Aspen Extreme. And it was a ski movie. And I watched the ski movie. And there's a scene in there where these two dudes from Michigan are living in a caboose on the river and outside of Aspen. And Dexter runs in and he goes, Tej, you're on the cover of Powder Magazine. And so I think right then at 8 years old, I knew that I wanted to be a ski journalist. And maybe before that, I wanted to be like a basketball player or like a professional baseball player, or maybe work for my dad or something like that. But um, I don't know what it was, but there was something about the fact that like the magazine that was in this like movie that I was watching on my parents' TV was also in my grocery store. And they wrote about places that I'd never heard of that sounded like fantasies to me, like Mammoth, like Aspen, like Whistler. And so, growing up in upstate New York, that felt pretty far away, but I did have a mountain close by. And so I started bringing my family's video camera to the mountain and shooting my friends. And around that time, people started skiing backwards, tails started getting turned up on skis, and I don't know what it was, but it just felt like to use a poor metaphor, I guess, like it was really a snowball in that
Yeah.
like I'd try something, sometimes it wouldn't work, sometimes, but I gain a little bit of traction every time, and I've just been gaining traction for 20 years, I
It's
think.
so funny, man. Now I feel like we're totally kindred spirits because I lived in Aspen for a while myself. I'm also a 37-year-old media operator. And yeah, I've also sort of manifested my dream careers. It seems like you have, and sort of knew what I wanted to do from a young age. Well, Mike, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks for sharing a little bit about your story. So obviously I want to talk all about Mountain Gazette because it's become an obsession of mine. I think it's one of the most exciting, brilliant media properties in the outdoor industry right now. And it has a really fascinating history. So for our listeners who may not be subscribers, who may never heard of the publication, just sketch the arc of the history of Mountain Gazette up until when you took over.
Sure. So Mountain Gazette was actually founded as Skiers Gazette. It's Colorado born publication. It was founded by a guy named Mike Moore, who was a very talented, brilliant editor of his day. He's no longer with us. And from Skiers Gazette until 1972, they covered a lot of Colorado U.S. ski team based stuff. They were involved in a lot of the 60s and 70s, artist activism, athlete thing that I know a lot of people think is like brand new today, but it's actually like was pretty prevalent back in the 60s and 70s. They covered that. And then 72, they pivoted to Mountain Gazette just to kind of cover a broader, aspect of life. And I've always sort of had that philosophy that, mountain town people are not one trick ponies. We're not just like waking up in the morning and hopping on our bike. Like we've got deep emotional connections to nature, to music, to art, to food, to the environment that, I think a lot of people have really simple thoughts about mountain town living. I just find it to be incredibly profound. And so from 72 to 79, Mountain Gazette ran and was known as the village voice of outdoor culture. Like they were a little mischievous, they were a little funny, they always aimed to inform, they were thoughtful. Like I think the one thing they weren't assholes.
Yeah.
You may have thought they were assholes, but really like they were proving a point, I mean, there are ads in those 72 issues that say like Alaska, save it or sell it back to Russia. Like, and the idea of like just environmentalism, which was a pretty radical idea in the 70s. And, the magazine shut down in 79. It was brought back to life in 2000 until 2012. It was run by a legendary Colorado writer named John Fahey. It's really amazing. He's actually out promoting a book right now about hiking every day for a year with his dog. I mean, Fahey is a serial writer. He's a serial outdoors person. And he really restored some of that gruff, from 2000 to 2012, they broke a lot of writers. Mountain Gazette's always been known for getting the legends, the Hunter S. Thompsons, the Dick Dorworths, but also getting some like unsung writers who would then go on to bigger careers. I mean, I think for me, I was really pleasantly surprised to see like Brendan Leonard in one of the early gazettes from 2000. And like, they just a lot like it always attracted a certain type of person. And then in 2012, it shut down. And at a bar in Alaska, I got a call from a former editor of the Gazette, Doug Schnitzbahn, and also Peter Cray. And they said, I think the Mountain Gazette might be for sale if it's something you want to pursue. And so I was actually in Unalaska, Alaska, Dutch Harbor, where they filmed Deadliest Catch. I was working
Okay.
on a documentary about commercial fishermen up there, kind of like the reality of what dangerous or deadliest catch is. And I used my $30 a half hour Wi-Fi credit to make my introduction to the owner. And 6 months later, I bought it at a bar across the street from Outdoor Retailer, his choice.
During the
With a
show.
Yeah, it was the first morning of the show. We met up.
Wow.
Blake, the former owner, had flown from the East Coast. We met up, and I loved it. I slipped him a check. He looked at the amount. He agreed to the price, and we ordered 2 Coors Banquet beers at 9 in the morning. And we signed the bill of sale in my friend Dan's booth. He owns Philo Gear
Okay.
across the street. And let me tell you, Dylan, in 2020, in January, boy, was I bright eyed and bushy tail. Had no idea that anything in the world could disrupt this perfectly hatched plan to resurrect Mountain Gazette. And of
Yeah.
course, we all know what happened in March of 2020 with the pandemic,
Yeah.
and that set us on our course. And we were scrappy, and we were founded in one of the worst economic times in American history, and I think we're better for it,
Yeah.
because we're scrappy and resilient right off the get go.
Yeah. And it seems like the business is in a good place and growing at this point under new ownership. And we can talk about more about that in a second. But you touched on something that I wanted to talk about too, those being sort of the legends of American literature who used to contribute to Mountain Gazette: Edward Abbey, Royal Robbins, Hunter Thompson. And you mentioned Mike Moore too. And it seemed like you had some sort of like connection to him as a writer, as a creative, as an artist. So I'd love to hear you talk about maybe that connection or what inspired you about Mike Moore and his early ownership and
Yeah,
curation of the magazine.
I think I say this a lot. Like, it's hard to know where you're going to go if you don't know where you've been. And
Mm.
so the truth was, like, I didn't know much about Mountain Gazette outside of what my friends Peter and Doug had contributed during the last years of it, because I was in the industry at that point. And so I was vaguely familiar with what they were doing. And so when I got the archives, I started digging into it. And what I found was that Mike was a light-handed editor. I've always prided myself on being a light-handed editor. Not that I want to let grammar mistakes or clarity issues get through, but I'm a big believer that if you're going to hire someone to write something, that their style and their voice should be there. And that's where that curation comes in. And I've worked with editors in the past that wanted everyone to sound the same because that was how the publication sounded. And I just, when I looked at those early gazettes, they all felt totally unique, totally different because there were different voices in there. And I felt a connection to him because after the Gazette had failed, he moved back to Vermont, which is where I actually moved to California from, and he became a book editor. And I thought, like, there's a lot of ways to like lick your wounds, but being like, I'm going to move to the Green Mountains, which is a place that's deep and dear to my heart, and kind of finish out your days that way is it's poetic a bit.
Yeah.
And at that time during the pandemic, I mean, my wife and I have family back east. Like, we live 3,000 plus miles away from our nearest relatives. And I was thinking that maybe we would move back east, to be closer to family. You start thinking about these life and death things during a global pandemic, as we all did. And I
Mhm.
don't know, that was what connected me to him. And I thought, okay, well, what did he see in these writers? Because sure, he did get, Royal to write, Chenard wrote, Doug Tompkins wrote, North Face took out some of their first ads. But obviously, like, it's never a one-way street. Like, they saw something in Mountain Gazette that it was going to, and I tried to dissect that as an editor.
Yeah.
And so that's what I saw in those early Mountain Gazettes, is like, this is why people wanted to pick this up. This
Yeah.
is why people enjoyed it. And I've always thought of media kind of like food. I don't know how to dissect a recipe from a taste, but I know there's a lot of brilliant chefs out there that can. And I think I do. I'm not calling myself brilliant by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think I have that talent to look at a piece of media and sort of dissect, like, the way it's made, what ingredients are there, what it maybe is overpowering the dish, if you will, and what's like a little subtle and adding to it. So that's
Totally.
that was my connection to Mike when I first looked in the archive.
Yeah, and you use the words different and unique, and it feels like that very much is carried through into this new generation of the Mountain Gazette. And that's one thing that I want to talk about here in a second. But I think it's important to also just like spend a little bit of time on your personal career. You sort of told us a little bit about it, but I read somewhere that you said something to the effect of you were running into the limitations of being able to work for other people, and here you are
Was
starting out on your own. So maybe if you want to say a few words about the specific career experience that you had working in the industry, what some of the frustrations were there, and what you felt you could improve on taking over your own operation.
I don't, Dylan, I don't know if it's a good quality or or like something I need to work on as I get older, but I'm from a very, very large family, and there's a natural inclination when you're in a very large family to try to fix the problems. I'm one of the younger grandkids of the family, and so I watched a lot of my older cousins stumble and f up their way through life, and I think I naturally became this person that tried to help, whether it was wanted or not. And I think what happened is that like I would get to organizations. I love being a team player. You know, I would learn the organization, the history, what are our values. I would try to embody those values in my work. But then if we strayed from them, I would always say, like, well, what the fuck, guys?
Yeah.
You know, like, why are we doing this? Like, this is not our core value. This is like not what our readers expect from us. Like, we're, you know, I felt like there were a lot of limitations at some of the places I worked. And, you know, but at the same time, I'm a sponge and I want to be a lifelong learner. So whether it was, you know, Matt Harvey, Chris K. O'Connell, Doug Bishop running newschoolers.com out of a closet in their apartment in Montreal, you know, like, and being like, oh, okay, wow, this is like what ski media is. That was my first experience. Like showing up, there's beer cans everywhere. And like they're also cashing 5-figure checks from brands for advertising online and creating the first like video upload system in skiing, you know, after SAS films, you know, it's just, I learned from them. I was like, wow, these guys are living a pretty like meager existence in a city in one of the coolest cities in North America, but they're like having a huge impact on skiing, you know, like, and it's not perfect. And they know it's not perfect, but every day it's getting a little better and they know what their faults are and they're, you know, and then from there going to Ski the East, where I watched, you know, Jeff McDonald and Chris James bring a feeling of like kind of no one believes in us, no one cares about us, East Coast, like we're more hardcore than you, putting a name on that, creating Ski the East as a brand, filming it, not making excuses for why the skiing was bad or good or whatever, but just being like we go every day. And that really taught me how to care about a community, how to be in a community, how to cultivate a community without leading a community. I think that's a really big thing is like there, I wouldn't say there's like a leadership quality to Mountain Gazette. Like we're all in it together, you
Yeah.
know? And then from there I went to Powder and it's called the Bible of Skiing. And I remember calling my dad when I got the interview saying, one day I'll tell my kids I interviewed at Powder because I had no expectation that they would so foolishly hire like a 23-year-old kid from the East Coast who cared about street skiing, you
Yeah.
know, and like would, given an opportunity, would prefer to spend like 4 super late nights in the streets of Albany with Tom Wallish hitting handrails and talking about that than like going to Alta. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, and at Powder, I mean, I call that my grad school, you know, and I had great teachers and, and, you know, just the grind of that taught me a lot too. That wasn't what I wanted to do with my life was be a 60 to 70 hour a week person. I felt
Yeah.
like my quality of life was pretty low. My life experiences were super high and my
Yeah.
quality of life was super low. And then, yeah, like I've learned something from all these places and it's not to say that they're run poorly or anything like that, but I felt like every Friday night, you know, Pat Bridges from Snowboarder, you know, T-Bird, like all these guys, we'd all get together at a bar and I would just sit there because they were older than me.
Yeah.
And I'd hear these stories about, you know, T-Bird brandishing a sidearm for the first time in his life on a Arctic Circle trip with Jeremy Jones, you know, and he was on polar bear watch.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, like, do you think a sidearm could take down a polar bear? And he's like, I don't really know. I should have asked that. But like just I was a sponge, man. And I felt like those were my teachers. And we used to complain a lot about what could make the magazines better. And I actually think what I did is I just mishmashed all their ideas and turned it into what we have at
Yeah.
Mountain Gazette today.
You know, I just met T Bird also because he works for Natural Selection, right? And Travis
He
Rice.
does.
Yeah, I
And
just met him in Portland a few months ago. I want to have him on the show here
he's
soon too.
he's a wonderful human being.
Yeah,
One of the more genuine people I've ever met.
cool.
A crazy good writer, and he shoots for the Portland Trailblazers. No big
Yeah,
deal.
yeah,
So
so cool.
yeah,
So when you bought the magazine, you were very much going against conventional wisdom, resuscitating a dead print publication at a time when magazines were dying, especially in our industry. You now use print ain't dead on a lot of your merch, which I love. What gave you the confidence to go against that conventional wisdom at the time?
Um, couple things. So one was the Surfer's Journal is amongst all the tides changing and the wind direction changing and everything. Surfer's Journal is still going forward,
Yep.
right? And the Peasant family has done a brilliant job of cultivating a core community where
And they do the golfer's journal now too.
they do. And what's funny is the COO of the Golfers Journal was my roommate in San Clemente, Tim Woodruff, another great guy to be on.
Awesome. I've listened
He's
to
got it.
podcasts with him. I'd love to have him on.
He's a great guy. And so, I knew they were doing it right. And I felt like, on a way wider level, like, how many subscriptions do you have, Dylan? Like, I can tell you right now, my family probably has like 40
Yeah.
between like Honest Diapers, Apple Music, Max, like Netflix, like Disney Plus. Um, I mean, subscriptions are a big part of life in the world today.
Mhm.
It's convenience, it's reliability. You only subscribe to things that you know you like, that you know you're going to use, and you cancel them if you don't. And I thought that cancellation part was really key. Was like, we're not going to make people feel like they need this. They're either going to know they need it or they don't. And I always say that like a canceled subscription is the best thing ever. They gave us a shot. We're not for them. We also run that ad. We're not for everyone. And
Yeah.
I thought that there was a chance to hold up a mirror to current mountain culture and show the similarities and differences of where we've been, where we're going, and just that there are people out there that are doing really remarkable things, not for attention, but because it feeds their soul, you know? And I felt like there wasn't a place that could do that. And so that's what I wanted to be. And I was confident that over 20 years, I had met enough incredible people that maybe some of them would share their stories in the Gazette. And
So
so
cool.
that is absolutely like exploded.
Yeah.
So now I'm meeting new people that are putting themselves in Mountain Gazette and telling stories that they don't feel they can tell in more mainstream magazines like the New Yorker or the Atlantic. And so that feels really good too, that we get to be that vessel.
Yeah. Okay. So going back to the purchase, obviously we don't need to talk about numbers or anything like that. What I'm more interested in is like the classic buy versus build conundrum. Like, why wouldn't you just stand up your own new print publication, especially with all the network and connections that you have in the industry, rather than buy this dead brand that admittedly does have a legendary history but didn't exist anymore?
What's it? Reduce, reuse, recycle, like, um, why not? It worked. I joked that it was like a 1979 dirt bike that only I knew how to fix. And so I felt like I had that strategic advantage, and like I don't think in 2020, it'd been dead for almost 9 years, that Mountain Gazette had a ton of brand equity, like just floating around. It's not like if Nike went away tomorrow, we'd all feel it.
Yeah.
It's so entwined in our culture. But I felt like Mountain Gazette, it was the right vessel. And I frankly just I want a big thing for me is I like legacy building. I like building on things versus starting brand new. And what I thought was cool was there were these young, crazy talented photographers who were getting thumbnail size images in other magazines. And I just knew visually, if you gave them a huge format, they could build on the legacy and on the shoulders of Royal Robbins and Hunter S. Thompson. And what I want, hopefully, is not for my name to be associated with those people, but for our contributors to be. I mean, I'll just call him right now. Like, I think Ari Schneider is one of the greatest contributors in Mountain Gazette history, and he's only contributed to our version of it, but he will follow a story. I mean, he's digging through court records right now for an upcoming story. Like he's dedicated. He's a craftsman. He knows what he's doing. And I think again, like I think his name belongs there.
Mm,
And sure, like we could start over and start new, but why not put George Sibley and Ari Schneider in the same issue like we did with 200? George Sibley's written for the Mountain Gazette since it was 1966 Skiers Gazette. He's 82. I don't
awesome.
even know if Ari's 30, but why not see where that goes so that maybe when Ari's 82, my kids or whoever runs Mountain Gazette at that point are now holding up Ari the way we're holding up Sibley and being like, hey, 22-year-old kid from the future, like you get to be next to this. And I think that's it, is like we want to create people that have substance, they have substance in their life, right? And in our pages, we want to give them the chance to show who they really are and the credibility that they have. And our writers write for a ton of people, but I
Yeah.
can tell you that with a light-handed editor like me, they get to really show who they are and what they can do.
Awesome.
So yeah.
So coming back to being unique and different, everything about Mountain Gazette feels differentiated, and to build anything great in the world, it has to be differentiated. And it just feels brave and courageous too, in a way. And you've sort of touched on that in some ways, that's part of Mountain Gazette's legacy, just having a little bit of an edge, a little bit of maybe more of an artistic bent, taking bigger risks than maybe other print and publications and other media brands would. And as a subscriber, the articles really feel like they do have more depth, more honesty to them. The photos are fantastically curated. The art is beautiful. So first, like talking about the content before we talk about the format, which is also really differentiated. Talk about the content. You've already mentioned sort of the light-handed approach you take to editing, but like what feels like a Mountain Gazette story, and what's the process of curating each issue and deciding what you want to include?
So I'm a believer that every person, like truly every person, has a pretty amazing story to tell. Um, Whether it's how they grew up or how they got to where they are, like everyone loves the come up story. That's a very prevalent theme in podcasts, is like, hey, like let's do the come up story. Like what were the adversity? But I also think that like I believe in the individual. And I think that our secret sauce that we're very open about, so it's not exactly a secret, is that every issue is surprising, because it's a reflection of the people who made it. And I can't imagine a world in which the same contributors who contribute to 200 will contribute to 205, like all of them, like we do have regulars for sure, because they've got perspective, they've got a lot of new ideas. But we have a lot of newcomers that come too. And I think that when it comes to like what makes a Mountain Gazette story, is it's got to come from the gut, or it's got to come from deep in your brain. It's got to be, we always say like inspire, surprise, inform are kind of those are the legs we stand on with every issue. And um, I I think that it's not me being brave, it's our contributors being brave. I mean, we get 6,000 plus submissions per year,
Mm,
and publish this year. We'll publish more stories than ever because Mountain Gazette 200 is 40 extra pages to celebrate 200 pages.
200 pages.
Uh,
I love it. I love it.
yeah, we were like, how do we celebrate 200? And we thought about all these retrospective pieces and stuff. And we're like, well, we don't really want to be like, look how rad we've been. We're like, let's give them what they like, which is more Mountain Gazette. And we'll make it 200 because it's clever. And it was honestly just so much more work. But I've got this issue sitting right next to me. I'm not going to show it to you because you're a subscriber.
I
Once you
can't
get the
wait.
math,
I can't wait.
but um, I just I never want anyone to mail it in. That's what doesn't work for Mountain Gazette.
Yeah.
And a lot of freelancers don't have the opportunity to spend time. You know, I know that our rates are at the top. Like we pay well. That's always been a thing. I'm very honest with people. If they ask for more money than we can pay, I'm super honest, and it's not a negotiating tactic so much as it's like, man, I wish we could pay that, but we can't. Um, But I want to set up, was a freelancer myself. I want to set up the best conditions for freelancers to do their best work. There's so much economic, insecurity in freelancing that just say like, hey, put your heart and soul and your head into this for as long as it takes you. And I always tell them, if you can bang this out in a day and we're going to pay you that rate, you're killing it. If it takes you 6 months, I mean, we have one writer who's been working on a piece for 18 months and she's been struggling with it. We're not giving up on her. We're working with her and it'll come out. And we're not going to tell you which one it was or which one it wasn't. But like when you see it, you'll see it and you'll know that it took her 18 months to work on it. And like,
Feel it. Yeah.
and it becomes, we really want people to have their signature freelance piece in our pages. Like you can go write for other magazines to pay your rent and stuff, but we want to make sure that a bright spot in your resume is when you get published in Mountain Gazette.
Amazing. So the other thing that's hyper differentiated is the format. The magazine, it's physically enormous. It's 11 by 17 inches. It's made for a coffee table, not to be thrown in a backpack. Where did you arrive on that format? Is that something that you inherited or something that you pioneered?
No. So the original Gazette was a newspaper. They went oversized for their time, which again, I thought was really cool. So that was kind of where it came from. I saw a magazine in Brooklyn called Victory Journal. It's done by this marketing firm called Doubleday and Cartwright. They're amazing. They did the Inter Miami logo. So Messi's literally wearing their work right now and
Okay.
super impressive. And so Victory Journal is a marketing piece for them. It is the exact same format. It is printed at the exact same place. They print way less copies than we do, but they also put Michael Jordan and Muhammad Ali on their cover. So, like they're really great. And so like their editorial is very, very different from ours, but their format's the same. And I just saw what you could do. I mean, we've all seen an image of Michael Jordan dunking, but when you see it 2.5 feet wide and a foot, 2 feet wide, foot and a half tall, excuse me, like it stays with you.
Does.
And I guess the thing that I recognized was that I bought a copy of that magazine in Brooklyn and it was so cumbersome to fly back to California with. And it's still here in my office. Like I've never been able to get rid of it. Like I've thought about it because it's like 6, 7 years old at this point, but I never got rid of it. And that I just recognized, okay, this has staying power. And there's only about 3 printers in the whole continent, all of North America, I think, that can print that size. And so they were really helpful in the beginning when I asked, like, this is where we print. And they just told me straight up, like, dude, it's effing expensive. And I was like, how expensive? And they told me it's like 4 times the cost of like a normal size magazine.
Really?
And
I'm
so like
wondering about that.
the barrier of entry was tough. And so my original thought was like, okay, if I can get to 1,000 subscribers, I'll be able to take home a little bit of money
Mhm.
and be able to make the second issue. And that was big for me, was like, can we get to 3 issues? Like the
Can
first climb was tough. Yeah, the first year is the grind, but yeah,
and
it's
now
worth
I know
it.
you've far surpassed all your goals for subscription. So maybe we should talk about that now, kind of get into more
Sure.
the practical X's and O's of running the business. Obviously, it's mostly a subscription business. It's a print publication that comes twice a year. So maybe if you want to talk about that cadence too, what the intention is behind it, but also the thing that I'd love to know about, there's a seems like a really curated group of advertisers that you include in the
Yeah.
magazine as well. So anything you want to say about the practical mix of revenue? Obviously, you don't need to say any number,
Oh, no
subscription
problem.
business versus ad business, et cetera.
Um, Advertising makes up less than 15% of our revenue. Um, with that being said, like our rates are not low. They're pretty high. Um I think we're appropriately priced personally. Um, Especially considering like when these ad rates were created a year ago, we were half the size we are now. Like we've
Mhm.
doubled in size again for the 3rd year in a row. Um, we're adding 1,100 new subscribers per month, which
That's
is
incredible.
wild. And I think the reason why we have great ad partners, the reason why we have a 91% auto renewal rate, meaning we only lose 9% of the customers we acquire,
Mhm.
which I told you is fine. Those are people that it's not for them. I don't ever want to have a product where I'm trying to convince people they need it. You either love it or you don't, and I'm cool about that. I don't want you to feel neutral about it. Um, and so, like, why do our ad partners want to work with us? Well, one, I would ask you to like ask them, but two, we've talked to them. Like, the fact is, like, we don't fake anything over here. There's not a lot of bullshit. Like, if you have a question about the business, you don't have to. We don't have to call our invest. Like, we don't have any investors. It's
Mhm.
me. Like, if you want to talk about ad sales, you call Connor. If you want to talk about our marketing initiatives, you can call Austin. If you want to talk about who runs our social, you call Amy. Copy editor, Kim. Art direction, John. Like Solomon recently asked, like, hey, can we work with your art director for our QST tour? It wasn't like, oh, let me see what the corporate pro. It was like, Joe, this is John. And now all the posters, you know what I mean? Like, you
Is
get
it
what you
hard
get.
though? I mean, in this age where print publications are dying, and we saw it recently with Outside and their roll up of all these legacy outdoor brands, that the print publications were the things that were sacrificed as soon as things got tight. Is it difficult to convince brands to advertise with Mountain Gazette when they could otherwise be spending on YouTube ads or whatever?
No, we have, for the last year and a half, we have had 3 to 6 brands on a waiting list to get into our pages. Um, and we don't use that to our advantage. And I don't mean that in like, we're not taking advantage of an opportunity. Like, we're not taking advantage of our partners. Like, we could get into bidding wars. That's not what we do though. We stick with the brands that have been with us. We increase their rates based on like our numbers. We have reasons for backing things up. And we're not, the biggest thing, man. I think this is going to come out of the business. We're not overcapitalized.
Mm.
There's like no one, I've made my investment back, like, who knows? I don't even care. Like, like several hundred times over. Like, we're good.
Yeah. Yeah.
But more importantly, I like that when I go to the brewery that's next to our office, there are Mountain Gazette subscribers who aren't intimidated by me. They feel like they can walk up and tell me they thought something sucked. They like this. They didn't. My neighbor's a subscriber. He didn't like a story we ran like 3 years ago when we first started, and he let me know when I was taking my trash out. Like, we're here. Like, you have a problem with something. Like, we have a 40-hour a week customer service person who is there not to defend us, but to try to understand where people are coming from. Like, okay, your magazine got shipped to the wrong place. Like, let's dissect. First of all, let's get you a new issue. Then let's figure out what happened. Let's fix the core problem. Like, um, dude, our secret sauce is I'm gonna swear, we give a fuck.
Yeah.
We care about the people who are buying our product.
I mean,
And so
that's almost reflected too when you hold the magazine too. Like the same care that you give to the subscribers who keep the whole operation afloat, that's invested into the product that you give them. You mentioned that printing the magazine in a smaller format would be much more affordable, but would probably degrade the experience of the reader. And
this
so it's a
doesn't
reflection of you
feel,
giving a fuck.
yeah,
Yeah.
we do. We get, I mean, like, it's not fake. Like, literally, we're having some like end of the year meetings in November and December. Like, we're gonna do our first all hands meeting this winter. We're all gonna get together and ski. The whole, group that works with us, a couple contributors, and like, we're not getting together to be like pat ourselves on the back. Man, we kicked ass last year. We're actually gonna be like, hey, how can we make the process better for you guys, for the people who like work for us? Like, what are some things I screw up as a manager?
Yeah.
Like, what are some things that make you uncomfortable about Mountain Gazette that you wish were different? What are some things? And like, it's not some official policy that we're putting out in like a press release to like gain points with whatever certain crowd. Like, well, dude, we're just doing this because I care. I will tell you that maybe the most annoying thing about working with me, um, is that I'm constantly asking everyone who works with me how they're doing and if they're okay.
Yeah.
Like, hey, like, we asked you to really grind last month. Like, was that too much? Like, how you feel? And a lot of them laugh. I mean, Connor Sedmack, our associate publisher, just laughs. He's like, dude, life's good. I ski a lot. Like, He's going to Buffs games, he's on the Deion Sanders like train right now. He's happy and like, but I'm
It's
always
hard. I mean, media is a grind. I know firsthand. So maybe this is a good opportunity to talk about the team a little bit. Again, sort of
sure.
getting into the X's and O's of the business operation. Tell us, the mix between full-time people, contractors, maybe excluding the contributors.
Sure. So I'm going to open our masthead right here because I've got it and it's easier for me to remember.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm the editor of the magazine. John Coleman, a guy I played Little League Baseball with and go to Goose and Dead and Co shows with in the summertime, is our art director. Kim Stravers, who has copy edited every significant piece of work I've ever worked on. Like I wrote a book about Haiti with Kehinde Wiley a few years ago. She copy edited that. Um, I trust Kim completely.
Mhm.
Um, and she would hate it if I called her a mentor because we're too close in age. But she's been someone of significance in my career, and she's our copy editor. I feel really great about that. Merritt Lentz, who I met through Moment Skis. He designed the Moment Skis website. He designed our website when he was living out of a van during COVID, using like mobile hotspots and stuff. And I just found a kindred spirit there. He is like an entrepreneur with a heart. He really cares. He gives a lot of himself, but he doesn't give too much. And I think that's a problem that runs rampant in outdoors. We're always trying to give more of ourselves in the hope of what more comes. So it's like just doing a good job on time. That's all I ask for,
Yeah.
and making mistakes is awesome. We've got Hans Ludwig is our jaded local. He writes our column in the back. He obviously wrote that column at Powder, and when Powder went down, I asked him if he wanted to keep it going, and he has since 195. So he's been doing it for like
I
five
didn't
issues.
realize that. Wow. So that's part of the Powder's legacy is now Mountain.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
little bit. We have a lot of Powder. My former bosses have all contributed. Like
Yeah.
a lot of my colleagues there have contributed. Cy Whitling's our cartoonist. Let's see who else we have. My wife is the vice president, but she has a full-time career. She has that title for many reasons, but mostly is that our dinner table talks when our kids were asleep was like me workshopping ideas. And she's from hospitality, right?
Yeah.
So she loves hospitality. And so this magazine was built on the idea of like, how can we be hospitable to all the parties involved? Ad partners, subscribers, our printer, our contributor, like everyone, our contributors, our staff. Um, Connor Sudmack is our associate publisher. Austin Holt is our marketing manager. Quickly Connor came up to me the day I bought the Gazette and shook my hand and said, "Hey, if you ever need a sales guy, let me know." And the fact was, I said, "I can't afford to hire you." And then 17 months later, I could. And I remembered that conversation because he looked me in the eye and said he was interested. And he ended up coming and he left his job and he came and worked for us. And he's been with us ever since.
Awesome.
Austin Holt, friend of mine from Maine, came up in the 2000 East Coast ski scene with me. And just a really brilliant marketing mind, analytical. He and I think in that he was like, "Hey, the reason why I want to work for Mountain Gazette is not about the money. It's like I want to learn from you." So, he asked of me full transparency. So he has a full view into the business, how it's doing, what it's not doing. Like we talk strategy. Like he's a lot more than a marketing manager.
Mm.
Amy Duran is our community manager. If you've ever, Amy's answered it. And dude, she's the best. Like Amy's the type of person where like she she is totally cool with like the gnarly customer service because you're like, where the fuck's my magazine? It's expensive,
Yeah.
whatever. And she's like, I get it. You're upset, but let's not talk this way to each other. Like, let's be cool and let's get to solve the problem. So like she's just incredible. Ryan Rowe just started doing our public relations. She's from the Sideways Life. She's making
She's who
sure
put
that
us together. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And well, exactly. She's making sure that I'm getting introduced to other media companies, media entrepreneurs, and just making cool introductions. She's gotten us some really incredible press about Mountain Gazette, which has been cool. John Buzdar produces our podcast, Mountain Gazette Library. He was a
Yeah.
contributor for 195 when he was in college and said, "I'm going to school for audio engineering." I couldn't afford him at the time. here
Yeah.
we are a few years later, and he's doing 2 seasons a year of Mountain Gazette Library. Kamal Shetty is our customer support coordinator. She lives in India. And when I say she lives in India, like I always say that because it doesn't feel like she lives in India. She is such a part of our daily life. She is answering everything, and we are working to try to get her to come out next year to our retreat and
Yeah.
get her on skis for the first time. Like she means like again, other heart and soul. And then Hannah Truby is our intern, and it like I feel bad even calling her an intern because she's one of those people that's like just totally working herself into a job. All of our interns are paid,
Yeah.
I don't mind telling you they're paid $25 an hour, and their workload is like manageable, like we
Mhm.
understand why they're doing this. They're trying to learn something. We don't want to just give them all the shit work. And frankly, what Hannah does is like she takes a lot off of Austin and I's plate when it comes to like email communications and reporting and interviewing. And what I like about Hannah is she's a total pro. She's like way too young to be this professional.
Yeah.
And that reflects well on us. I mean, we've got a ton of other people, but like for now,
It's a
I'll
big
answer any questions.
operation. Yeah.
It is. Everyone is a 1099 contractor by choice. I told you I keep checking in on them,
Yep.
keep asking if they want to become full-time employees. And the fact is that, um, lifestyle is very important in outdoor. And I mean, Austin will tell you that in the spring, after like we just worked so hard the first like 5 months, the year just like, hey, this is our strategy. We really have big growth goals this year. And we accomplish them. I was calling him daily, being like, "Did you ride your bike today, dude?
Yeah.
Like, are you riding your bike?" And so, with a salary position comes, like set hours.
Yeah.
And frankly, the people that work with me at Mountain Gazette, like, I don't babysit. I would never insult them by even saying I have to babysit them. Like, they all get their work done. They all do good work. We all reasonably care about each other's time. So we're never really making anyone wait.
Mhm.
And we have a healthy dose of respect for one another and our life goals and like where we want to go. And again, like we're always asking ourselves, hey, are we not doing this the right way for John? Like John plays music in the summertime, our art director, like we should accommodate our schedule so that because he cares about that and we want to help facilitate that. Um,
Great. So back to the content. In addition to having this physical product, the magazine that we've talked about a bunch, it feels like you guys are doing a great job of embracing digital. You send a newsletter every Sunday that I love to read. And now you just mentioned the Mountain Gazette library, which feels like an important part of the content portfolio, everything that you guys offer. Maybe meditate a little bit on that physical product versus digital product thing and how you're leaning into both of those areas of the business and recognizing that both are important in the 21st century.
yeah, I mean, I say print ain't dead quite a bit, right? But I'm never gonna just totally throw away a medium. I'm not, I don't believe in cryptocurrency. I don't believe in NFTs, but at the same time, I think blockchain technology could have some reasonable applications in the future. You know what I mean? Let's be honest. AOL chat rooms weren't awesome, but the internet's pretty good now. Like it's gotten a lot better, um, so I guess when it comes to digital, I'm not anti-digital. I'm anti-publishing online for pennies with banner ads and clickbait. Um, I'm anti not respecting your reader. Like, I think at a certain point you have to ask yourself, is what we're doing ethical by our reader? Like tricky, like, brackets, video, the most explosive avalanche in the history of Alta. And you find out it's from like 1932 and someone put you know what I mean? It's like they tricked you to click on something.
Yeah.
I don't love that. I believe in catchy headlines, but when it came to digital, big question we had is, people have this Mountain Gazette legacy runs really deep. It's not just like we don't have fans. Like we have subscribers whose grandfather wrote for the Skiers Gazette in the 60s,
Yeah.
and they've never seen that article. And so the goal with the library was to bring that curation that we do with the magazine to a podcast format, do it audiobook style, do it evergreen style, which is pretty similar to our magazine. And that, like, if you pick up 195, our spring issue from 3 years ago, it still reads great. Some of it's a little timely, but like most of it is not. 90% plus is not. And I think that's the key, is like making media that stands the test of time. And what we're doing with the library and with John is, we did our first season. I think it went really well. What I love is that every week we're adding more people. I mean, what I love is that 4/5 of our subscribers our print subscribers said they listen to the Mountain Gazette library. So as far as I'm concerned, people are always worried about, oh, how big's your audience? Don't care. I
Yeah.
care about the people that subscribe. You subscribe to our magazine. I actually care.
Yeah.
Like, I care. I don't care that I'm not reaching like someone on the fringe. I want
Yeah.
a deep,
Not about
meaningful connection.
scale. It's not about scale. It's about developing a relationship. And just to be, I think,
Yeah,
to be more explicit with our listeners here, the Mountain Gazette library, you can search for it on any podcast player, and it's audio versions of written articles from the archive, sometimes going way back in the time machine. So that's probably one of the advantages of owning all that IP now, is that you can go
it
back,
is. Yeah.
be surprised and delighted from the things that were published in it back in the 70s. Mike,
And
go
we're
ahead.
not, I do want to say one thing, Dylan, because this is a problem with the library. Is like, uh, we're moving in a really wonderful place in outdoor, of inclusion. And I think that some of the stories that were written in the 60s and 70s are not appropriate for today. And John's our host, right? He's our producer. And, we had a long talk about, are these appropriate to run today? And the answer is yeah. Like, we're not endorsing the views of 1973 at the
Yeah.
current Mountain Gazette. But the fact is, these things were published in the Mountain Gazette. This is how people felt. And we're okay. We're, again, respecting our audience and saying, like, look, we know these are not appropriate for today, but this is how people wrote. And if anything, I'd love for people to hold up some of those stories that are not appropriate today and saying, like, see, look at how shitty men used to be to women, or the
Yeah.
way we talked about indigenous people in the 70s. Like, look at the way we talked about environmentalists in the 70s, and using it as a measuring stick for progress. And I think
Yeah.
that's important, because we're always talking about how shitty the world is today. But the fact is, when I look into the old Gazette, I see a lot of beauty. I see a lot of really meaningful work. And I also see a lot of stuff that shows me we've come a super long way in outdoor, and we should pat our backs on this. We're not done
Yeah.
doing the work, but we have done a lot of work, and we should give ourselves a little bit of credit for being more inclusive,
Yeah.
for and so that's why the library means a lot. It's a way for us to open the archive in a meaningful way, and yeah, let people use it as a measuring stick. Let people, like, see these cool, funny articles. I mean, I love the letters in the 70s that were writing saying, there's no way in hell you'll be able to build a tram in Jackson Hole. Never happened. Impossible. you know Love that.
Very cool. So, Mike, we can start winding down now, but obviously want to ask about the future before I get to a couple sort of quick hitter closing questions. So, anything you want to say about the future of the Mountain Gazette? Are there plans to expand, make it, give it a bigger footprint, or is it more about doubling down on the basics at this point?
um I'm super proud of getting to 200. Feels like a real milestone. Like, every issue going forward, at least in my lifetime, will have a 2 in front of it instead of a 1, which that feels important to me. I'm finding that I can't stop curating Mountain Gazette, in that, like, I'm assigning stories for 202 and 203. So next fall, and 2 springs from now. And mostly, as far as expanding our footprint, no, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. As I said earlier, we're adding 1,100 subscribers a month. And if that were to triple, or like get cut in half, like, we are at a critical mass now where we're good. We're really happy. We're attracting like insane talent. I mean, Steve Martin, the comedian, is in our next issue, and he just sent me his outline for his 201 piece. Like, it wasn't a flash in the pan. We begged him to cut. Like,
Yeah.
he's he's inspired by what we're doing here, and he's doing more. He's in for maybe two cartoons next year. We know at least one.
Yeah.
Um, and as far as like what we want to do, I don't mind saying it's like we're in a real place of privilege. And I don't say that with any regret. I say it with a lot of responsibility. And so some of the things that we want to do, like here in North Lake Tahoe, in Kings Beach, where we're based, is um, small things that have meaningful impacts. There's a brewery here, and parents always hate when their kids are on iPads and stuff. And so we're going to create a little free library with one of our contributors. And the brewery create a red ale, an amber ale, but we're spelling it READ. It's marked up $1. And every dollar from the sale of that beer will go towards buying new books for that little free library. And you can come and you can take them and everything. And so we're going to start there, right? And we're hoping to
Amazing.
do, at the end of last year, we donated $20,000 to protect our winners through our Protect Our Friggin' Winners campaign. Like, Jeremy's a contributor. Jeremy's a subscriber. Like, we want to work with Jeremy Jones and Pow in different ways. We don't want to just do what everyone else does. We're like, hey, how can we like do crazy meaningful work? Like what if we raise 20 grand right before the midterms and we donate that money 48 hours before the midterms so that like you could do a mass digital scale, like really tangible driven results. We're working with Hannah Eddy to paint a mural here in Kings Beach, which, is not the most vibrant town here in Tahoe, but like honestly, like this is where we live. This is where we make our magazine. We're proud of our community. It's a bilingual community. Um, and so we're working with all of the local elementary schools this winter to come up with the idea for the mural. Why? Because yeah, I have a 4-year-old, almost 5-year-old who will be a part of it, but like hundreds of kids that live here in North Lake Tahoe will be able to drive by this wall for the rest of their lives and say, I helped make that. Like, I think that's good. I don't know. I think that's a good thing to do. Like, we're in a position where we can start flexing our financial power, and I want to do that. You know, I'm already lucky enough. I get to ski. I've got
Yeah.
a cool life. Like, we're good. Like, what's in the future is we want to start taking care of our communities. We want to find ways to empower them and make them better in real ways, tangible ways.
I mean, as a media operator myself, I'm so inspired by you and what you do with Mountain Gazette, and especially hearing these other plans that are so non-traditional. It feels very much in the Mountain Gazette spirit, giving back to the community and thinking about things in maybe a contrarian from that perspective. So congratulations to you for what you've built. And just, as somebody who works in media too, like it's not easy. And it's great that Mountain Gazette is in such a healthy financial position now that you can reinvest not only in the business, but in the communities and the people that make it possible. A couple closing questions for you here. First one is, who is one person that's had like a particularly big impact on your career and why?
Uh, Person I will say first is Derek Taylor, who is the editor that hired me at Powder Magazine. Um, he felt the magazine needed someone different and not the same old. And he hired me when I was less qualified than the other guy. But he thought I maybe had different potential. I would say more. And I don't know if I would be here if Derek didn't take a chance on me. And I think about that a lot when it comes to these young writers who are writing for us. We have a 21-year-old in the next issue, and this is his big break. And I remember thinking, like, this is what Derek did with me. I should do that with
Awesome.
this next person. So yeah,
Yeah,
Derek for sure.
paying it forward. Final question for you here, Mike. What's something outside of work that you're particularly excited about at the moment? I know you're going on vacation soon before issue 200 comes out, but what's something outside of work that you're pumped up about?
Oh man, the thing I'm most pumped about in my entire life is watching my sons grow up. I'm not just a light-handed editor. I'm probably a too light-handed of a parent. And what I love is watching my sons develop into really thoughtful, caring people. Especially in like a hyper competitive area like this. We're not far from the Bay Area and the giant tech companies where there's Olympians everywhere,
Yeah.
and professional athletes. And I think what's cool is my kids have placed a premium because, let's be honest, like their mom and I like want them to be this is like I want them to be kind. I want them to care about the people around them. And I think any profession you go into, you can be really successful, like, putting your head down, doing good work and being kind and caring about people. Like, I think that's a recipe for success. And we're not pushing them in any direction, but I'm just watching them naturally kind of become those people. And that's the coolest thing ever. Like, I'm obsessed with my family to like
That's,
a fault in that I'm kind of a hermit and that I just sort of like to hang out with them. And I'm not big on the social scene like I used to be in my 20s.
yeah, yeah.
So
You and me
yeah,
both. You and me both,
yeah,
buddy. It reminds me, I have a similar disposition as a father. And when my father-in-law, my wife's dad, gave a toast at our wedding, who's a guy that I look up to, and he was I think, a great dad, and took that light-handed approach that you just mentioned. But one of the things he said in his speech at our wedding was that he realized that with both of his daughters, my wife and her sister, that they sort of come out for him. They've got like their own attitude, their own personality, and that he
yeah.
realized the most important role, or the most important thing for him to do, was not interfere. Those were the words that he used: don't interfere. And it sounds like you
Yeah.
abide by that philosophy as an editor and as a father, and I'm
I'm
sure
a,
the contributors and your children both benefit.
I thanks so much for having me on, man. I think like it's not about being laissez-faire. I'm an active participant in all of these things, but I find a lot of just wonder and amazement in people and the
Yeah,
human spirit. I believe in the inherent goodness of people, and I think if given the opportunity to give, people will do it. I really do think that, and I know that that's a contrarian thought in today's world, but I've seen it with my kids. I've seen it with our contributors. It doesn't mean they're going to give someone a pass so much as it means that they're going to do the right ethical thing nine
yeah.
times out of ten, which is pretty cool. So it's been a pleasure to chat with you, man.
Yeah, well, Mike, again, yeah, it's great to be connected again. Long time admirer now. Can't wait to get issue 200. Congratulations with everything that you've built there at Mountain Gazette, and yeah, hopefully we can stay in touch.
I really like that. Thank you so much.